Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, a lot of interesting articles in the news this week, Katan. President Putin meeting with President of Turkey, Erdogan, for the 7th time in 12 months. So those two countries becoming very close. Also with the U.S. Backing out of the Iran nuke deal, we have the European Union offering an idea on how to keep that going. Remember, many countries want to keep the deal going with Iran. And also, some United States airmen are in big trouble, as they should have been on high alert, but it turns out they were just high and not on alert whatsoever.
Oh, sad.
So these stories and more, but first, the Ebola outbreak and convincing Mbandaka residents of the seriousness of the Ebola outbreak has been a struggle for aid agencies. Now, in the central market there, bushmeat vendors have not stopped selling smoked monkey meat. In fact, they question the source of the Ebola virus altogether.
One vendor told TRT World, "We don't really know where this Ebola sickness came from. We sell monkey meat every day and people buy it. I inherited this business from my parents, and at that time, no one talked about Ebola."
Well, vendors are also saying the virus is bad for business. Another vendor told reporters, "Before the epidemic, we used to sell a piece of monkey meat for up to $36 US. But now," she says, "she can only sell it for $1.79 in US dollars. But even so, the people are still buying the meat every day, regardless of the danger."
It seems like people are really hooked on that monkey meat, and no threat of Ebola or any other virus is going to keep them from carrying on with their traditions. Well, for over 40 years ago, the deadly virus was discovered along the Ebola River, just a few hundred kilometers northeast of Mbandaka. Scientists think it originally came from fruit bats, but it has also been linked to the carcasses of freshly slaughtered animals, which are eaten as bushmeat. Now, bushmeat varies depending upon what's available and in different areas, of course, but can be from not only monkeys, but it can be from reptiles and even rats.
And if you see some of those pictures, Katan, when they're showing this, what they refer to as the bushmeat, the flies are just crawling all over it. I mean, you know, completely unsanitary condition there, regardless of the, you know, the type of meat, but
yeah. So if that meat is contaminated and those flies are on that meat, the next place they go, they have the increased opportunity of taking that virus along with them. So yeah, very unsanitary.
Well, the latest outbreak started in a remote village 150 kilometers northwest of Mbandaka, but a week ago, the first case was reported in the city. Now, the main worry is a rapid spread to other major cities, including the capitals of the DRC, the Republic of Congo, and the Central African Republic, because Mbandaka is a transport hub to all of them, and that's what they were saying, because it's on the river there, could quickly spread to the other cities.
Well, let's hope not. Well, in the capital of Kinshasa, concern is growing. Residents would like authorities to organize controlled checkpoints in airports and river ports, especially for boats coming from the infected areas. But the World Health Organization and African governments have a plan which includes thousands of doses of the experimental vaccine for the virus that have just arrived. And you know, the thing that's scary about this Ebola, unlike an enemy coming at you from another country, this is an enemy that you can't see at all. So you don't know if what just came to your area is contaminated and could potentially have the Ebola virus or not.
Well, DR Congo health minister has said it's crucial to plan the vaccinations. The targets are the health workers, but also those who have been in contact with confirmed cases. Health authorities have already started to immunize a small number of workers, with the goal being over 600 people in the first phase. But Dr. Peter Salama, head of the WHO's Health Emergencies Program, said it will be challenging to find about 400 of these people who have spread out because they can only be reached by motorcycle.
Yeah, the difficult to reach areas. Nevertheless, they will try to reach all of them because Ebola is one of the deadliest diseases known to mankind. It's highly infectious and has an average mortality rate of 50%. It's passed on to humans through wildlife, and then, of course, it's spread by human contact.
Well, you would think those entrusted with guarding America's nuclear missiles would be the best of the best. However, more than a dozen airmen at F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming were recently disciplined for being in a drug ring. Not only did the airmen sell the mind-altering drugs, including LSD, they used them as well. Well, it was so bad that one admitted he could not have responded if there had been a nuclear emergency.
Interesting. The Wyoming base is at the forefront of the United States nuclear defense, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The 90th Missile Wing keeps combat-ready Minuteman missiles, ICBMs, on alert to launch anywhere in the world at a moment's notice. The missiles are tipped with nuclear warheads, each 20 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima.
Of course, the airmen responsible for guarding these weapons are supposed to be on high alert, but court-martial documents reveal a drug syndicate being operated on base where some were just getting high from mind-altering, bending drugs like LSD.
That, to me, would be kind of scary. Not that they wouldn't be able to, send a nuclear missile out if an alert came out, but accidentally sending a nuclear missile out when there is none. One airman testified at his court-martial, "I absolutely just love mind altering," he said, "my mind." Under oath, another said, "I didn't know if I was going to die that night or not." And he said that he would not have been able to perform his duty if there was a nuclear security emergency.
Well, an investigation found over a dozen personnel on base had been using LSD, as well as cocaine, ecstasy, and marijuana between 2015 and 2016. Dr. Elias Dakwar, a psychiatrist at Columbia University's Irving Medical Center, explained to CBS News, someone using these drugs is, quote, going to be affected on the job and directly affected by the acute intoxicating effects of LSD.
Dr. Dakwar works with substance abuse disorders and says LSD's effects last longer than the initial trip. There may still be lingering anxiety, lingering suspicion. As a result, any kind of experience that is harrowing, it leaves a certain residue. Well, the Air Force issued a statement to which it said, in part, there are multiple checks to ensure airmen are able to execute the mission safely, securely, and effectively.
And like you said, Katan, the accidental launch with someone using the drugs, there's a lot of paranoia when somebody's taking these drugs, and, before you know it, they're trying to push the wrong buttons.
That's right.
Well, over the course of more than a decade, the United States Middle East military strategy has been ineffective at bringing peace and stability to the region. Now, people aren't waving American flags, they're burning them. And allies like Turkey are angry with the U.S. Also, unlike the U.S. predicted, Russia has not lost power because of the Syrian conflict, but gained power.
Turns out the U.S. war on terrorism in Afghanistan, Libya, and now Syria has not endeared the Arab world to the U.S., especially when it comes to Turkey. Former U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson once said of Turkey, they are, quote, a NATO ally and a friend of the United States. It's in a very turbulent part of the world, end quote.
But Turkey's President Erdogan has made statements like this one numerous times. Oh, America, I told you many times you are either with us or all these terrorist organizations, end quote. Now, the two countries are barely on speaking terms because the U.S. is withholding weapons, arming Syrian Kurds, which is the YPG, and that is the Turkey's one of Turkey's sworn enemies. So they're arming one of their allies' enemies. So that isn't sitting well with them. And if there was a friendship, it is now dying. Now, Turkey believes it can unite and lead the Muslim world.
Well, things got much worse for President Trump and his administration as soon as he announced he would be moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. But that move has rubbed pretty much everyone in the region and beyond the wrong way. The King of Jordan commented saying, "The United States' decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel is a dangerous one. It will threaten security and stability and frustrate efforts to resume the peace process."
While Trump is losing allies, Putin is finding them. He and Turkey's president have been meeting regularly over the war in Syria and have not invited President Trump to their meetings. They have also held meetings with the Iranian leader.
And when it comes to ambassadors, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace has said, "You can bet there are no unfilled Russian ambassadorships in countries that matter to Moscow as there are today. Almost unbelievably vacant American posts in Egypt, Jordan, Libya, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, and of course Iran, where we have no embassy."
And that in itself really shows you what a lot of the foreign countries over in the Middle East think of the United States if they don't even have the ambassadors there. Well, many countries believe America's foreign policies are meant to divide, not to unite.
Interesting. Well, speaking of division, apparently the EU's Donald Tusk has some comments or thoughts in regards to the United States and right now our inability to gain new friends because of some of the choices and the decisions that we've made in the past. Larry, what do you have for us?
In direct opposition to U.S. efforts, the European Union is contriving measures to prop up and support the Iranian nuclear deal. The plan is also reportedly designed to help businesses counteract sanctions imposed by America for buying and selling with nations that the U.S. has deemed unacceptable. And in speaking at a recent meeting, the European Council President Donald Tusk stated that with friends like America, who needs enemies? The European leader went on to say that President Trump has made them realize that if you want a helping hand, you will find it at the end of your arm. Along with President Tusk, other powerful European leaders, such as German Chancellor Angela Merkel, are breaking ranks and calling on Europe to become more self-determined. The biggest issues plaguing America's relationship with Europe is reportedly its pulling out of the Iranian deal unilaterally without discussing the implications of that decision with any of its allies, and also the sense that the current administration could really care less how anyone feels about it. The opinion shared by many is that America's policy is America first, but analysts say the policy of the U.S. first could very well lead to the U.S. being alone. In an exhibition of even yet more controversial decision-making, President Trump has canceled the upcoming summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for what the president perceived as open hostility in a recent statement made by North Korea. President Trump stated in a letter to Mr. Un that he felt the timing for the meeting between the two was inappropriate, and in response to nuclear bragging reportedly coming from Kim Jong-un, the president also issued a few counterpunches asserting America's nuclear superiority. The president said that he thought a wonderful dialogue was building up between the two nations, and ultimately he stated it is only that dialogue that matters. President Trump thanked the North Korean leader for releasing the American hostages being held by the nation, but lamented what he called the loss of a great opportunity for lasting peace, great prosperity, and wealth. The president says that the missed opportunity is truly a sad moment in history. Following that announcement, Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, went on record as being deeply concerned with the cancellation, and in line with previous prescriptions given by the Vatican, the UN head urged both parties to return to dialogue and to find the best path to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. At the same time, President Trump is employing subtleties to suggest that North Korea's change in tone may be due to Beijing. The president stated in a recent conference where South Korea's president was also present that he believes that things changed after the two nations met in May, and he cannot say that he is happy about it. For North Korea's part, they are reported to be dissatisfied with comparisons being made by the U.S. between themselves and murdered Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, as well as the continued military drills taking place between the U.S. and South Korea. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Katan, it seems like President Trump is implying that China is behind Kim Jong-un's withdrawal or pulling back from the summit meeting that they were going to have that was scheduled. And of course, it's been on, it's been off, and back and forth, but looks like he's blaming China there for the most recent cancellation.
Right.
Well, German Chancellor Angela Merkel met with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang on a visit to China. Now, this visit is on the heels of Iran's statement to stay in the nuclear deal with world powers, which U.S. President Donald Trump said that he would withdraw. European powers said that they are committed to seeing the deal through. Now, Merkel said in a speech there, "We're united by the attitude that we don't want to put this agreement in question. The deal is not perfect either, but you always have to ask yourself about the alternatives, and the alternatives are even more uncertain."
Continuing, she said, "That's why we believe it's better to stand by the agreement." Well, Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei said that Iran is going to stay in the deal so that the country can benefit from it. Iran does have a few demands, though. The Ayatollah said Europe must guarantee the total sale of Iran's oil, and European banks must guarantee business transaction with the Islamic Republic.
Well, previously under sanctions, Iran's GDP fell greatly and negatively impacted its economy and the spending power of its citizens. Now, so far, the U.S. hasn't imposed any new sanctions, but expects if it does, it would have the full support of its European allies.
Regarding the U.S. and the Iran deal, Trita Parsi, president of the National Iranian Council, said that the people of Iran see the actions of the U.S. as an escalation towards war. He said that new sanctions will make their lives miserable. And regarding the moves by John Bolton, Parsi said that he doesn't think that that is John Bolton, is trying to put pressure on Iran to strike deals. Parsi said, "This guy doesn't strike deals, he starts wars." Well, Parsi said that the main reason that Trump is pushing to move out of the deal and put sanctions on the Iranians is because of pressure from the Saudis and the Israelis.
Well, he also said that he believes that the Iranians will stay in the deal as long as the other countries continue to uphold their end of the deal and fill in where the U.S. left off. The fear of European countries is sanctions from the U.S. if they do business with Iran. So in closing, Parsi said, this is where there is a really strong political will on the Europeans to make sure that this happens.
Well, the U.S. coalition has reportedly bombarded 2 Syrian army positions in Syria's eastern desert. Reports say that the air raid occurred near a military installation on the border near Iraq. The U.S. and its allies have been bombing Syria with the stated goal of driving out Daesh terrorists. The strikes have created many civilian casualties, and Syria has complained to the UN that the invasion violates its sovereignty, of course, and the U.S.-led operations is in Syria without the country's consent or a UN mandate.
Well, President Vladimir Putin met with Turkish President Erdogan. They held talks on bilateral and alternate issues, joint energy projects, and the conflict in Syria, as well as the U.S. recognizing Jerusalem, Al-Quds, as the capital of Israel. Erdogan says Israel sees the recent events as an opportunity to increase violence and pressure on the Palestinians, but no one can have morality and principles and values yet ignore these crimes. We share with Russia the same views and agree to cooperate.
President Putin disagreed with Trump on his decision, saying it's destabilizing and ruins the prospects of peace, and said that the status of the city, referring to Jerusalem, should be decided through talks. Well, relations between Turkey and the U.S. are strained, and some say that its interest is in dealing with regional countries, the interests of Turkey, regional countries, and forming new alliances to preserve its security.
Well, this meeting was the 7th for the two presidents in the past 12 months. This time, the meeting comes at a critical time with the defeat of Daesh in Iraq and Syria and the Jerusalem Al-Quds issue. Putin also announced from Ankara that Russia will partake in the meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation on Jerusalem Al-Quds. Now, many are awaiting the outcome of the meeting, as it is considered a very important step to tackle the U.S.'s decision.
Well, regarding more sanctions, the U.S. is pressuring Germany to abandon a major German-Russian deal on a gas pipeline. The U.S. is considering sanctions on companies involved with the deal. Sandra Ardkirk, the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Diplomacy, said any pipeline project, and there are multiple pipeline projects in the world that are potentially covered by this sanctions authority, is in an elevated risk of sanctions.
Well, she also said that Washington would be delighted if the project did not take place. The German Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy, Peter Altmaier, said in response, if the U.S. says America first and puts its economic interests before others, then we Europeans will define our own economic interests too and fight for that.
Well, Hans-Jorg Müller, the MP or the alternate for German party, said that this is pure blackmail, as Germany was told more or less, if you don't want a trade war with the EU and the US, then get rid of Nord Stream 2 project, which is the pipeline project, and that he hopes that Mrs. Merkel doesn't give into this, as it is a dirty game and a dead-end game.
Well, Secretary of Defense Mattis spoke regarding some of what he called good news regarding the U.S.-Korea summit, saying that it may be back on and that it's a mutual give and take when you're trying to put on a big summit and the diplomats are still meeting. So, Katan, it looks like the summit might be back on once again. As we mentioned, it keeps off, on. So it might be on and off until the date of the 12th there of next month comes around for them to actually meet.
Well, it sounds like Secretary Mattis is saying, hey, look, this is a normal process, you know, the changing of the mind, so don't worry about it. Let's just, you know, stay the course. Well, U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, received some sharp criticism at the University of Houston and received an interesting welcome while giving a speech. Protesters within the audience shouted, "The blood is in your hands. You continue to sign off on the genocide of a native people. You are an accomplice to terrorists and colonizers." Then chants rang out saying, "Nikki, Nikki, can't you see? You are on a killing spree."
Well, chanting continued while Miss Haley stood quietly, chanting, "Nikki Haley, you can't hide. You signed off on genocide," and "Free Palestine," as they were ushered out of the auditorium.
Well, it definitely seems like, as we've seen the university there in Houston, that students are pretty frustrated with what they see going on in the international community. Many of people losing their lives, many people being displaced. We talked about the U.S. war, coalition-led war in Syria, as they tried to oust Daesh. Well, many civilians are being displaced as a result of that, which creates a burden on the neighboring countries. You know, it looks like a dire situation that people in the world right now are saying, hey, look, let's stop the killing, let's sit down and let's find a solution, because we've got to end all this suffering.
Yeah, and they really do. The option of talking it and coming to some type of peaceful agreement, many see now that, hey, let's do that instead of all this fighting, because as you mentioned, the people, the inhabitants of these countries are really the ones that are taking the brunt of all this, as their homes and places of employment and their cities, everything that they've, grown up there and lived for, is being destroyed. So they're the ones that suffer the most.
Yeah, that's right. And then you tie on top of that the diseases and the viruses that we see, like we mentioned about Ebola. Once the wars start, we're going to see an increase in those viruses and diseases as well. Well, if you're looking for a way of peace and a way to health and safety, you might want to think about contacting the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, Yahweh'sBranch.com, or you can even go to our website at YPNnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can email them at info@Yahweh.com. Any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen right now. And once again, if you haven't already done so, please check out the Yisrael Says program by going to YisraelSays.com and the Ask Yisrael program by going to AskYisrael.com. You're guaranteed to be able to find your scriptural answers.
Well, while the world is sending out their ambassadors to go to different countries to find solutions to stop war, well, Yisrael Hawkins is an ambassador of peace, and he already has the solution to stop all wars. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Up next, Yisrael Hawkins. For all of us at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Hammerman.
Thank you for watching.